Alright, so here we have the path for Jammit 110. I mean, the song was played at 110, but the path remains the same as regular speed. So, we start off with 0 points, as always. And the first couple of phrases are 2 whammy phrases. We're going to get as much as possible from these phrases, of course. Nothing really to say about them, pretty simple. And we also have another phrase here, so we get 3 phrases before our first activation. And now, remembering where this is the hardest part of the first activation. What we want to realise is that this is in cycles. There's 4 cycles of this, I don't know what you call riff, line, whatever. So here you can see, every time there's a red, blue trill, that's the end of a cycle, and the open note is the start of the next one. So yeah, we're counting 1, 2, 3 cycles completed, and then this is our 4th cycle, and we want to be activating when we have our orange, blue, red, green quad zig basically, and it goes back up. So yeah, we're just waiting for this orange note here. It's the only instance of the well, actually no, it's not the only instance. It's the second instance of said quad zig happening in a cycle. So if you want, we can just wait for the second instance of it. But I would mostly play this one by feel, and then when I felt like, you know, this is the time, it would be right, because we'd waited long enough. But yeah, and there's no trill at the end of this one as well. So if your note speed is low enough, you'd be able to tell before the note even came up. But anyway, yeah, activating here, getting this overlap, and that's about all there is to that first activation. Next one, 1, 2 phrases, 3 phrases, no whammy in them, and yeah, we want to activate on the next star power phrase. So right here, easy to remember, it's the first 3-note chord after this bit with the green yellows, so that's another way to remember it. But I'll be waiting for the phrase. It's also an easy audio cue as well, because it's basically the start of this, I don't know what you'd call it, chorus bit or whatever. Now this activation is a bit stupid because we're activating and then there's some whammy straight after. So I would always be losing whammy at this point. It would just basically be a scramble for me to get my finger or hand around the whammy bar as quick as possible to get as much whammy as I could out of these notes, but it normally wouldn't be that much. So this is one of the activations I was losing the most points from. But yeah, next one, 1, 2 whammy phrases. And it says to activate right after a whammy phrase. Now, in the past, I've said when it's activation immediately following whammy, I would tilt, but in this case, we can actually delay the activation to the next set of chords. So these green, yellow, blues, I delayed it to that, and we don't really lose any points actually, because it's the same. It's all 3-note chords. It's the same pattern all the way through. So you know, instead of ending here, it would end here if we got perfect whammy. So we don't lose any points at all. It's just telling us to activate here because it'll always give us the earliest possible activation point. So there's no disadvantage to activating here. So there was no farmer says itis problems with this activation, although it might appear like that at face value, and it was okay, this activation. Next one is an immediate activation, so we get a whammy phrase and a whammy phrase. Now this one was kind of a quick transition from whammying to pressing the button, so sometimes I would lose a bit of whammy on these notes, but the activation isn't the most valuable in the song. So yeah, you see we got 414 to 436, so what, about 11,000 points? Not that much, but obviously worth enough to make a difference. So yeah, it's I believe a red hammer-on as well, which hammer-ons are harder to activate on than strum notes because you can't get the timing exact. But it's okay. It's a relatively easy activation. It's easy to remember at least. So after the blue note, we are activating immediately. Simple enough. Next 2 phrases are both 1-note whammy phrases. Now I don't really know why these are 1 note, but they are. So remember to whammy, basically be whamming through this whole thing, waiting for the phrases. And then our activation point, it says here, much like the earlier case with this activation, where it's the earliest possible instance, this is the earliest possible instance here, and I just opted to wait for this, because this is tap strumming, so it's a bit hit or miss, really. So I just waited for the tap strumming to be over, and then activate it most likely on this yellow note, or a little bit later. Just making sure not to activate so late that we'd overlap this phrase. But this activation is fine, just anywhere in the 16ths, as long as it's not too late. And yeah, we don't want to overlap this because we get 1, 2, 3, 4 phrases, and we want to be having full bar for this last activation, which is worth a ton of points. So, it says to activate this blue note. I did not activate on the blue note. I instead opted to just activate on the measure. And yeah, no squeeze. Losing out on 200 points, I guess, but it was never that close. 200 points, you know. You can sacrifice 200 points here and there and get away with it. Not that I ever did on this song, but you know, maybe if I played it a bit more, I might have one time. But yeah, activating here, easy activation point. And getting this overlap, which is easy because we're on full bar. And that is that activation, nothing else really to say there. And then we're up to our last activation. So we get 2 phrases with no whammy. And we want to be activating pretty much on the next note, not exactly the next note. It says to activate here. You can pretty much activate anywhere in this like bit, because it's gonna end at the next cycle anyway. So you'd probably end up getting the same number of chords. It's just your squeezing would change. So yeah, that's the activation. And yeah, that is the path for Jammit 110 and Jammit regular speed. Actually, the score it's saying is 802. I never did hit 800k, but I would normally get about 798 to 799, so reasonable. It did happen that every time I played this song I lost because the people I were against were like the experts at this song, so I was a bit screwed from the get-go. But nonetheless, at least I can put some thought behind it. Anyway, we'll move on to the notes now.
Okay, so now we're going to take a look at the notes for Jammit 110. Now, despite this song being about 5 minutes long, there isn't actually going to be too much to talk about in this. In fact, I would say pretty much after the first 2 minutes there's nothing really to talk about. There's like one thing to talk about. But we will talk about said things, as I normally do. So, I guess the main thing is not actually this, but this is one thing we can talk about, is the main riff. So it's all one-handing stuff, a lot of sliding, and just regular position shifting. It's not hard and it's not particularly fast, but this trill that goes into the open note, letting go of the red in time can maybe be a little bit of an issue. Or getting the slide into it just right. Because it's sliding from green straight into doing a mini trill. So that can be a little bit awkward, but yeah, just one-handing it, sliding into it rather than doing it in first position, I think. And not tapping it, because that just makes it a bit too convoluted. It's only like, you know, a quarter of a second, if that, probably less. Okay, so that's that. There really isn't too much to say there. Verse. So this is it looks tricky. It's not that tricky once you realise that all of these strumming bits, they're in either sets of 3 or sets of 5. Except for one which is longer, but that also ends on a down. So let me just count how many there are here. Oh, it's at 110, so I can't slow it down. So it's 10 going into 3. So 13. So it ends on a down. You see, so it's all on down strums. So I'll just play it through. Right, and right at the end we see the hint of what the actual hardest part of the song is. So, to summarise, you know, when we get these ones that are just 3, we're just basically just all strumming through those. You don't even have to hit them as burst, you can literally just do them as triplets. But that can sort of look like it's falling behind the beat line, so it's probably not the best to do that. So burst strumming that, while straight alt strumming is not too hard. And that ends on an up after the 3 like slow ones after. This is really self-explanatory stuff there. Those end on downs. And then it's just a cycle. So the fast strumming leads into the second cycle of it, which can be a bit strange in a way, but it's nothing that would make the section impossible or anything. As far as these mini trills goes, instead of sliding up like we did in the tappy bit, I just literally I'm double tapping blue with my pinky there. And although there's 2 blues in a row, just letting go and then reapplying the double tap with the pinky works fine. And then as far as this little slide down into it, it is just that, we're sliding into it. And then we already have our fingers anchored on both green and red at this point, so it's no problem hitting the chords afterwards. So that's the verse part. We're going to go to the very end of verse 1b and include that along with the odd riff part. And the odd riff is really really awkward, and was one of my weakest points in the whole tournament, I would say. Not even necessarily just this pool. So our first introduction to it, at least here at the end of verse 1b, is okay. The forcing's a bit strange because we don't have open note hammer-ons here, so we have to remember that it's sets of 3 strums instead of 2. But the positioning for that bit at least is pretty simple. Now this is a mess, and I still don't like this. I think I'm getting better at it, but it's horrible. Especially this bit here. You see, just a cluster. So my weak advice for this is that I try to stay in first position and stretch. So even when hitting like the orange reds, I would be hitting them like this. I would have my middle finger on the red, my pinky on the orange. I don't know why, but that seemed to simplify it a bit to me. Otherwise, I didn't like learn exactly how it went. I was just I just tried to play it as many times as I could, trying to figure out what made it easiest. And for some reason, staying in first position and like, you know, even stretching to this, it made it easier than doing all these position shifts, because that's just a little bit too much to think about while you're also thinking about when to release the fretboard completely to hit the open notes, when exactly to strum, because the forcing is strange and not consistent in it either. So yeah, just making one less thing to think about, and even with these stretches, made it easier for me. But it's still not 100% consistent. As I say, this was one of the worst parts for me. So yeah, just watch here. And that made it, yeah, I could probably hit it like 75% of the time. So 3 out of 4 times. I wouldn't say it was like 50-50. I hit it more often than I don't hit it, but it is awkward. And one other thing about this is that I don't anchor anything at all. So you see there where it's yellow, green, blue, green. I wouldn't be anchoring that. So yeah, because knowing when to release the anchor, as well as knowing when to release the notes entirely when it gets to an open note, it just makes it too convoluted. So we just Occam's razor it and just do it all in first position as if we're a beginner. And we don't know what position shifting is. Properly reaching for those orange notes. And it looks awkward. It is awkward. But it's awkward any way you slice it. I guess it's also worth mentioning that I'm pretty sure all the open note strumming bits end on down strums as well. So at least that's something. Okay, so that's pretty much all there is to this song. The rest of it is kind of easy, and or it's just repetitions of this stuff. This odd riff only happens once at least, but we have the tapping bit again, and we have the verse bit again. So there's like something I'll really quickly touch upon in guitar solo B, which are these extended sustains. Considering it's you know, a tournament based on score, we want to try and hold these sustains, and the way I'd be doing this is after hitting the blue strum there, I would immediately be anchoring green. So I'd be anchoring green all the way through this, basically transforming these extended sustains into chords. So there's actually more than you'd think going on there, because immediately after that is also some whammy, and the activation is right after that. So that like 5 seconds there, there's a lot more going on than you would ever think. But yeah, that's the guitar solo is easy, really, to hit all the notes. It's just holding those sustains can be a bit weird. And then the last thing I want to talk about in the song is the transition from right at the end of bridge 2B, because it's tap strumming, if you get what I mean. So this thing right here. So I basically just pretend there's hammer-ons instead of taps. So we're hitting this first one as a hammer-on, and then da-da-da-da-da, 5 strums basically, then using the first red as a hammer-on, and then strumming the rest of the reds, which will end on a down. And then this is just basic fretting. So there's a very small risk of overstrumming here. But yeah, that is all I really wanted to say about this song. Not that hard to FC outside of the open note riff, I would say. But the open note riff does make it annoying. But we'll do a run of the song now.
Separating from this world one last time.
Okay, so that was a Jammit 110. Got 798k. I was normally hitting about this to 799 in practice anyway. I never did hit 800k on this song, but nonetheless, that is that. And we'll move on now to Fuzz Universe 125.